So this is, so Blink.com was previously didn't really have any framework on it. It was pretty old school. It still is pretty old school, besides Vue, JavaScript websites. Here is the homepage. I don't know if you went to it. If you did, that's awesome. More Google Analytics for us. But the developer that I talked to who worked on this previously had worked on Angular application and Angular.js applications, and that was not the best experience for him. He thought Angular was too burdened by like over engineering, and it added a lot of cognitive overhead to just building applications. And I mean, you see a lot of familiar features like a search bar, you have category navigation, you have accounts, you have carts, and you really don't need a whole lot of code to make that work, at least in the front end. And so adding something like Angular here, where it's a single page application, you kind of had to rewrite the thing from the ground up with that frame of mind, at least. He didn't want to do that. And so Vue fit the bill for us because it was easy to introduce. You could add it incrementally. It was quick to adopt. You didn't really need to jump through a bunch of these like super weird terms like transcluders or transducers and service versus factories and all these different things. And so just to give you an idea of what I meant by how like sprinkled in Vue is, this is another example, or this is an example of where we use Vue in that top right-hand corner that I have highlighted. And in all honesty, it's just an if statement. So the developer added a class on these components, like literally js-auto-view, which back in 2007 was a pretty okay way to get things done. You would just look for that class, find it, initialize a Vue component on it. And all this would do is if you're logged in, it would say, okay, show you the username. And that's where it started. There's a few more places we have it sprinkled in. For example, this featured sales dropdown, which is a little bit more interactive. It makes more sense to use something like Vue here because we didn't have Bootstrap. Bootstrap existed, but I think this site might have predated Bootstrap. I'm not positive about that. Don't fact check me. But it's not like you can just take that off the shelf and add a dropdown. So the interactivity there with Vue is a little bit more robust. Trying it out again, seeing what else we could do. And then from there, we also used another if statement, the badge there on the cart. If you have something in your cart, it'll just tell you, yes, you do have something in your cart. In fact, remember correctly, that you've added it. So you might ask, why can't you just use this for like HTML tags, like ERB tags in Ruby? You're rendering the page with Rails. This is a Rails application. Most of the things we build it up for are in the back end. And that's pretty simple, yes. But that's not the point, I think, is it's more interesting to try new things and look for good opportunities to where to get them. And so if that's any testament to how small you can start with something like Vue, I think it might be kind of interesting to look for opportunities where you can try out new stuff on the applications you work on every day. Let's try to sync up my notes in my here. Yes. So, and that's a testament to how we got Vue where it is today in production, I think, is that the smaller you can keep your scope, the better chance of having your idea or whatever it is actually get in production for your users. So if we had decided to go the rewrite route for Blink, we would have had to stop all development and kind of do like a turn it off and turn it on approach once the new stuff's ready. And that might have not proved very valuable to customers. For one thing, who knows if they actually like the rewrite, if you're not actually testing it in front of them incrementally. And who knows if you have a new feature you want to ship that's going to kill your business or not, for whatever reason. Hypothetical, of course, but you want to make sure that you're always delivering value for the customers, and Vue is able to do that while still being in the mix of everything else going on in Blink. More importantly, also, the user doesn't really care what it's built in, and that's kind of hard to hear as engineers because I love the technical intricacies of the things we work with, but if you show it to a friend, they're like, I can't pay for this. Why can't you send a credit card? That's all I care about. They just want you to exchange money for stuff, and we care more about how it's structured, what it looks like behind the scenes, which is important still, but we always do the work for the customers. And like I showed about the different features, there's still key features, not critical business applications. Like we're not going to take down the website if the badge on that card doesn't work, and users still like check out. But I think it's an interesting place to try something new, to where it still has priority for users. Like the user experience will be improved by these features, but it's not so critical that you can't like ship something, and it's not risky enough to worry about. So if that feature's late, or if there's a problem with it, you can always kind of backtrack, and you're not gonna derail your timeline or deadline. So, and that's pretty much where the snowball started. And that's with the smaller blast radius stuff down here. I like thinking about this. At Optoro, we're doing a lot of work with services. The hot term now is microservices, but it's all just different isolated dependencies, things like that. When you have a small blast radius, there's two things I like to think about. Is one, it's small enough to try something new, or you want to take it further and see where you can go with it, because you've proven the small case, you know that it's working for you where it is, and what else can you do with it. That's kind of fun to think about, the greenfield mentality. The second part is if you absolutely hate it, you can ignore it. You can get rid of it, or you can just section it off to where it actually is useful for, and then never use it. And so that's also kind of hard for me to think about. I came from a content background. My last job was in a digital marketing agency. And so I liked to throw everything away and start from scratch like every single time. That was so much fun to me. But when you're building enterprise applications and things you actually have to maintain, you don't want to stick around with the 3 different frameworks in production you can't get rid of because you don't have any business priority behind trying something new. And so any wins you can make, I think this really worked for Optoro. Maybe it'll work for you guys too. But those 3 things are kind of what I took away from talking to the developer from Blink. I didn't actually work on Blink, full disclosure, so I don't have the full context of what's going on there. But being Vue to be first in production with all these 3 features, I think was a big critical part of why we used it. That also happened with CoffeeScript, though, and we're not going to talk about that today. Does anyone use CoffeeScript by any chance? Yeah? Oh, I was hoping everyone would say no. I'm sorry. I know. But, yeah. Yeah, so are we. There's actually, we can talk later, there's a script called decaffeinate that will do it for you. It's not readable enough. I know you still got to fix it, but it'll get you there somewhere. All right, so that's blink.com. That's kind of where it started in a nutshell. Now I want to take a quick detour before I talk about where we're at now, where we're going, just to tell you a little bit about Optoro. This might be like the most salesy part of this talk. I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. I just want to set the scene for what is coming up, like why this stuff matters, and hopefully put some pictures together about what we're doing. I was talking to my coworker on the way over here that when I started in Optoro about, so actually, if I go back a second, we introduced this in June 2017. I was hired a month after that, so I didn't get to see any of that stuff. But I don't know if that's serendipity or not. Anyway, I love working with Vue now. I'm so happy that it worked. But when I started, I thought I knew what was going on at Optoro, and I really didn't until I went down to our warehouse in Tennessee. And so I'm going to try and set the picture for that that right here. We work with big brands like Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, Lowe's, and Groupon, for example, and they ship us a lot of stuff that are returned by customers for whatever reason, and we process that and try to reduce their cost for handling their shipped returns, essentially. So what that adds up to is a bunch of savings for the environment. I don't know if you can read that top number that's kind of faded out there, but we diverted 1.4 million pounds of waste from landfills in 2018. These are all stats from last year. And so we're using our technology to figure out better decisions to make for how we repurpose these returned products in order to keep waste out of the environment. And so that's also in terms of carbon emissions, which actually comes from shipping stuff. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in retail space where a customer will return something to a store, and that store won't know what the heck to do. They will ship it back to a distribution center, or it'll sit there in the back of house until it goes out of the season, and then they'll clearance deep discount of like $1. And if it goes back to the distribution center, chances are they'll just ship it right back to the store. So that's a whole round trip wasted and just emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere that we don't need. And if we can't do anything with the unit, we will recycle it. So no matter what, we're trying to find the best place, the best secondary home for it. to reduce waste. And funny enough, that reducing the waste from the environment actually helps make money for the clients as well. So it's nice how those things coincide. Basically, what this really means, though, is that we have Vue deployed in a lot of different places, all over the place for a lot of different use cases at Optoro. This is our CEO at a talk last year, but really what I want you to focus on is the slide above him, which is pretty much how this magic happens. So if you think about the scan on the right is a unit coming into a warehouse, we figure out what the heck the thing is, where it came from. We apply a bunch of data magic to it, a lot of processing in terms of how old is the unit, where did it come from, is it damaged, stuff like that. And then we try to figure out where to sell it next. And we call this finding a unit's best home. And that's just a funny way, like a warm and fuzzy way to say, like, how do we make the most money for this thing? So in this case, it pointed to return to stock. A lot of companies will have contracts with vendors that said you can return X% of unsold inventory back to us for full price or for 80% price or something like that. Pretty cool contract to have. It's not super common. And that is pretty much Optoro in a nutshell. We process about 60K units, 40 to 60 a day, I think. So that's a lot of Vue in front of different people's eyes and things like that. So lots of code supporting all these processes. If you think about Blink, what I showed you before, that's like the output of Optoro. And the input is all of this, all the units that come from our client. That helps kind of frame this at all. All right, so I covered a lot of ground pretty quick. Now we can talk about where the snowball effect reached us here, I guess. How it grew from Blink.com into the massive development of Vue. We started with that those little dinky templates and components I showed you earlier, and we've upgraded to having at least 12 Vue apps in production, I think. And so those are full-fledged apps from the ground up. They're all single-page applications, and they're not like just single components. And so we made a lot of interesting changes along the way to get Vue in the mix. We started out with a big Angular and Bower. You guys remember Bower? Anyone use that? Anyone still use Bower? Unfortunately, we did too. Yeah, we ripped it out maybe 6 months ago, less than, something like that. If I can recommend anything, I recommend getting rid of Bower ASAP. It's not really a dependency manager. NPM, we'll talk more about NPM later, but NPM is a much better dependency manager. Bower just downloads stuff from Git. There's actually a lot of security vulnerabilities that have come out recently about Bower. So, sorry you're using it. Please kill it. It's actually not that hard. We can talk afterwards about trying to get rid of it if you're interested. But I think having 12 apps in production in the past year or so, I think maybe less than a year, or right around a year, is just a testament to how versatile and approachable Vue is as a framework. Does anyone not use Vue in here? No? Okay, so I'm talking to you right now. Let's get Vue in the mix. It's approachable. There's docs, there's everything. If you're still itching to try your new one, it is not I'm not going to say it's easy to pick up because this stuff's hard no matter how you slice it, but I think it's crazy to see how it went from such a small place to within 12 months having, if you measure that out, it's 1 app a month being released in production in front of users. So how did we get there, I guess? This is one example of an application that I built called the Scannable app. So the devices we use in our warehouses work with a scanner. And so you just point them at a UPC kind of thing, and it'll tell you what the heck that unit is. And I got a live demo of this. We'll see if that works. Not 3000, I made 8080. Yeah, so I built, we run these learning groups called code shops at Optoro. We do these once a week. It's either a code shop or a code talk. It works, they alternate. So if you have an idea you want to share or some cool code you've written you want to share that with your coworkers, basically a knowledge sharing session. And I created this as part of learning Vue and teaching people how I want to use Vue and getting feedback for how that works for everyone. So I built 2 different versions of this Scannable Inputs, which is just accepting a certain pattern of digits to match a UPC. and it just approaching it two different ways in terms of componentizing. So if you put in bad value, I don't know if you can see that, it just says invalid UPC. And then if you add a little bit more, you'll get a nice party parrot that says, hey, it was a good UPC, that looks good. So that input there was pretty coupled. It was all the logic in one component, and that's how I started out using Vue, but I don't really do that anymore. Let me get rid of that. So the one below it is functionally identical and visually identical, but it's componentized. So it's broken out into one component for handling input, and the other component for handling the business logic of validating that input. And that's the best way to do things in Vue. It's decoupling things, making very specific components that handle a use case and do it very well. Who's heard of the Unix philosophy before? If you haven't, the Unix philosophy is basically do one thing and do it well. And if you work with tools like CD and CP and MV on in your command line, not that crazy tools, but you know what they do, and everyone knows how everyone knows those core tools. And using those, you can compose them to build greater tools. And that's what Vue's all about. And applying that philosophy to how you build your components is going to make a lot of magic happen, I think. But back to my slides. Oops. Too fast. So I think one important thing about this, I'm not going to try and toot my own horn here because I did write this thing, but just in general about teaching people how to use stuff, I think it's good to provide examples of the good and the bad, because you can't just show someone how to do it right without them knowing how to do it wrong, because they're just going to repeat those patterns without actually thinking about why stuff exists that way or why it was organized here or there. So if you're trying to teach someone how to use Vue, one thing, you can't expect them to know all the stuff about Vue ahead of time. So, in my opinion, it was good to start in this one thing and then figure out how to break it down into its component parts after. I didn't touch anything. Can I just tap this? Yeah, awesome. Make sure caffeine is still working. Sweet. Okay. Yeah, so if there's no reference for how to actually do it wrong, how do you know if you're doing it right every time? Because it's hard to apply patterns to things if you only have one way of doing it every single time. This is actually open source if you want to check it out. I'm not going to vouch for the quality of the code because I did it in 2 days or something like that in my spare time just for the talk, but there are tests, and that's how I know it works, and it's functionally identical. So feel free to check it out. I can post a link later. There's also another application I love to reference. It's called Real World Vue App. And so if you're learning how to do a more of a single page application, a bigger product, I don't know if my coworkers here are going to hate me for showing this because I reference this all the time, but this is a great thing. It's community driven. It's updated pretty frequently, and it's got a lot of awesome patterns for how to solve pretty much everything in Vue. It's basically a Medium clone that they've built using Vue in a default backend. So one backend drives a bunch of different stuff. They have this in React and Angular. So if you're ever interested in how frameworks get stuff done, this is kind of like to do MVC plus. If you've heard of it. I like it a lot. All right. So that's kind of hard to see here a little bit. Can't really zoom in either. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, this is our first, I think it's the first Vue, the full single page Vue app we have in production after Blink. And so it took us a lot of time to get here. Like I mentioned, we were working with Angular, we were working with Bower before. So we had a gulp-based, we still have a gulp-based build system that was highly tailored to build Angular applications. And what we did to do that, actually Musafar did that, we hooked in Npm Scripts. Have you heard of Npm Scripts before? Is everyone familiar with that? Yes. Who's not? I can do a refresher. Cool. Npm Scripts is one of the best things, I think. I wish more ecosystems use something like that. It is a field in your package JSON, which, if you're familiar with Rails, that's like a gem file for requirements.txt in Django. It's what holds all your application dependencies, but also some metadata about it, like where does my Git repo live, who's the author of it, what's it called, stuff like that. And in there you have a scripts file, so you can, or a scripts field that you can write any script you want. And so the way I launched that demo app I just showed was npm run serve. And all the serve script does is tell you, how do I get a server started for my app? And npm run build is just, how do I build the thing? And so every app and every project might be built differently, but npm scripts is like the consistent API, so you always know how to hook into that every single time, no matter what. And I think that's really valuable because it's super easy to jump on a new project and get started. And that's like one of the things I like most about Rails is that it provides that beginner friendliness of generating things and just having easy commands ready for you. I guess it's a little bit more like Rake in the Rails. Anyway, so we upgraded our tooling to use npm scripts, and what that helped us do is decouple the build process from what's actually building the thing. What's up, Brad? So the cool part about that is previously we needed to have both of the codes together, and we couldn't really package anything up because it was all highly specific and homogeneous. Things had to live in the same folders, in the same places, and be named the same way every single time. With npm scripts, we can kind of hide that all behind one script tag. And so I've actually built, not script tag, just script command. I've actually built an application that runs Vue, React, and Angular all in one, being built with Angular script. npm scripts. I'm mixing my words up. A lot of S's. So that was pretty cool because they're all built differently. They're all wildly different ecosystems. But the cool part is that just by hooking in npm run build, you can do it all in one, and then you just gather your disk files and ship them. And so, yeah, Warehouse Metrics is the first application that we actually built using this process. And the rest of what made Vue so easy to hook into a build process, because the rest of our tools now just default to npm script. So it's been pretty instrumental for us to be able to ship new apps along the way. Yeah, next up, another example of success at Optoro with Vue is our first touch app. And so this is, I mentioned scanning devices. If you notice this, it looks like a pretty standard Android device, but it's got a really crazy looking shell around it. That's a hardware scanner and a bunch of other stuff. There's a camera in there too, I think. It's basically just like an industrial strength mobile device for warehouses. And every one of our workers in our warehouse, pretty much, they have one of these and they're scanning stuff all day long. And so our first touch app is a little bit different though, because we want to be able to get ahead of the curve a bit. We want to be able to know what's coming before it gets to our warehouse. And so in stores, people can actually scan the things that are returned as they're returned. We can tell them, hey, ship this to us because we can make more money for it, or put it back in your shelf because it's still good. And so this was delivered in 3 weeks. And I'm actually, I mentioned this before, I'm actually kind of annoyed because I think it was described as a super heroic effort. And that's Angular's tagline. And I was like, no, this is built in Vue. And so I was like, don't describe that as, I mean, it really was. I'm not sure the developer got a lot of sleep in those 3 weeks. But still, it's like, let's use Vue talk. Let's not do Angular talk. All right. Still trying. Oh yeah, and I want to show you in my notes here. This is a little behind the scenes shot of this in action. I just talked to the designer of the application earlier today. She shared this video with me. This is them testing the application. And so Vue is running on the device like you saw. I can't load it up. And he's scanning a barcode. And it will be printing. I think it's actually, this one's the one that doesn't work. Yeah, 500 error on that one. But this one over here is the actually working one. So we scan a label with the application. So Vue's driving user input. It's connecting with a native integration, working over APIs to then actually print a label out to ship this thing back to us. And so, like I said, there's a lot of technology going to evolve, and Vue is just like the start of that, just user interface, which is pretty cool. Chuck is over there, the one next to the guy. He's a mobile developer, so he's really interested in the native side of things. All right. So that was the different part of our mobile tooling. We are now building all of our mobile apps in Vue as well. And so people have probably heard of React Native, which is kind of the React side of things. Vue can do that too. We aren't quite going the React Native route yet with Vue. We really pretty much just have a like shell wrapper around our Vue app that just is served in a web view. This just interfaces with some of our APIs to like initiate the login session and then hands off the control to the Vue app from there. And then we call back to the native application when we need to. So the first iteration of this, pretty much, we just injected a bunch of globals into the Vue like window. You can do that in native. It's pretty crazy to see. I thought there was, when I first started, I thought there was like some magic native like God that was like making this happen. And no, you just look in the code and you find the function you want to run, and it's literally just injecting strings of JavaScript. And so that was a little bit of like a defeated moment for me. But we've iterated on this, and I think that's really cool because I think every developer knows that globals pretty much always cause you pain. And we ended up having like 1.2 million Honey Badger. Honey Badger is like an error collecting service. We've ended up having like 100 or 1.2 million errors collected from a poorly configured global we were working with. So that's one way they can bite you. Didn't really affect a whole lot. It's one of those areas you can kind of ignore. But 1.2 million of anything does not really feel good when it's bad. So our newest iteration of this ships a software or SDK that bundles up all that native functionality that our Vue app can call into. We're using modern APIs like post message and custom events to actually pass messages back and forth. And so the native integration can actually call back into Vue stuff once it's finished with its operations, and we can like more easily like fire success messages or error messages and things like that, and help the user out a little bit more there. I think that's all I got on native stuff. So these are the three critical parts of success that I think I've identified at Optoro with Vue. And incremental adoption is a critical one, and I think that's one of the things that Vue is best at. At least when Vue was first in the scene, it was one of the few that I could actually do this. Angular was very much buy everything and do it all in Angular or don't try. And React was kind of the same way. I think both of those are a little bit better now, but I like that that's been a guiding light for Vue since day one, because it's expecting your developers to start from the ground up every time is kind of unreasonable from a business perspective. If it were up to me, I would do it every day, but it's not up to me. So it's up to Brad. Brad's my director of technology, by the way. That's why I'm joking with him, because I'm up here and he's back there. Yeah. So this knowledge sharing is also cool. I think Vue does a great job of that as well. And I mentioned the code shops and code talks before, but Vue's docs and their style guides are like bar none. I think everyone I've talked to just raves about how easy it is to get ramped up because there's actual real world use cases for Vue in there. We were talking previously about how we tried using RxJS on one project, and RxJS is pretty cool, but it doesn't really tell you like what to do with it. It tells you like how you use it, and that's cool. It can do a lot of stuff. And Netflix has some pretty sweet tech talks about it, but it's also easy to shoot yourself in the foot because there's not really the community best practices around how to do it. And I think the style guide is amazing for ramping up newcomers to Vue because it's a one central reference point to have for best practices and trade-offs you're making when you have to decide how to get something. One thing we also did was create a GitHub group. I don't know if anyone's tried this before, but you can actually add a bunch of developers to a single group. And so if you want to get reviews from like 10 people, you can do that pretty easily. Instead of having to tag each one of them, you just tag the whole group to review in the PR. I don't know if you can do that with GitLab or not, but I hope you can because it's awesome. We have a front-end group that if we make changes, we can ask someone, hey, I need a second opinion on this. Am I naming these classes right? Or my pattern to follow? And we also use code owners on GitHub, which is you can specify in a file that this is a portion of the app code base that I care about. And so anytime someone changes that, ping me about it. I want to review it because I'm really interested in making sure that we follow some best practices around it. All right. The middle one's pretty cool too, iterative development. I think I skipped that in my notes. It's kind of hard to follow back and forth here. But yeah, like we said, like I was mentioning about greenfield development, that's my bread and butter. I would love to start fresh every time. And that was hard for me to admit, is that I can't do that at Optoro. But there's plenty of opportunity for it when the time comes. You just gotta like find the right place to execute with that. And so being able to iteratively add new features and experiment with stuff is really important, and finding ways to do that with Vue is really easy for us, like I showed up with Blink. Okay, so that's kind of where we started, where we're at. And now I want to talk about where we're going. And NPM is a big one, part of that. We have deployed a private NPM server in our local infrastructure. Fortunately, we have a DevOps team that can help us support tools like this on our platform. And if you don't, I think NPM private is only like $7 a month. And so trade the money that you, how much per user? Patch you didn't know about, thank you. So make sure you don't have a lot of users, or share one account or something like that. I don't know anyone from NPM, so don't tell them I told you to do that. But trade the money that you were spending on GitHub before they were acquired by Microsoft, $7 on GitHub. But anyway, NPM has helped us do a lot of stuff. We've had a gem in a box server, which is a similar thing for like Ruby gems. We've had that for a long, long time. It just seems like it's expected. We didn't have one for NPM. We were using some packages from like GitHub repos in Bower, but we removed that and we packaged them all up as NPM modules and published them to this repo. And that was really awesome because it helped us decouple iterating on those tools from iterating on the application. Because you don't want to slow down an application's software development if you need to fix a bug, like a style bug that's kind of overarching and not really related to your feature, but you kind of just want to do it because you can ship it in this PR and you know how to get out there. But what if it affects that other application over there because I didn't test that one? NPM helped us reduce a lot of that because we can version our packages now, and each consumer of those packages will just update when they want to or when they need to. And so if you're not affected by this bug, just leave it alone. Don't worry about upgrading. Or if there's a killer feature you actually really need, you can go iterate on that and release a new version of it without affecting any other. And so if you haven't heard of Semver, which is semantic versioning, I would definitely check that out. We follow that for our Ruby tools as well as NPM tools. I really don't know where it started, but I know it's hugely popular in the JavaScript community. And so it's helped us a lot without introducing breaking changes that are just going to be downloaded willy-nilly kind of thing. Funny enough, the first version of NPM server was not the most stable. Never took down a deploy, but it was annoying when developers would be like, hey, why isn't this working? And it would just 404 all the time. We fixed that, fortunately. The Vue CLI is another one that's super helpful for us. This is absolutely amazing. Please use Vue CLI. It's useful for prototyping small apps. It's also useful for cutting entire projects out of a template. And so Vue CLI is all built with plugins. It's very extensible. So if you haven't used this yet, you will see a list of options or prompts that you can choose for how you want to configure your project. Things like Babel transpiling from the latest and greatest JavaScript feature to be supported across different browsers, to what kind of linters do you want? Do you want ESLint, standard configuration, or Airbnb's configuration, all that stuff. It's pretty cool because all these small little modules, little plugins, change the code a little bit. Like they add dependencies to your package to JSON, and they add different hooks in your Webpack configuration, for example, that buy you this power for free right out of the box. As an end user, that stuff's super complicated if you've ever tried to get into it, and it's fun to learn, don't get me wrong, but it is distracting from shipping features. And so I like that Vue has figured out a way to make it powerful and easily approachable for users. One thing we're trying to do right now with this is the way we have been building Vue apps is we had basically a master copy of an application that we cut from Vue CLI probably like last July or August, I think. And it's kind of just sat there. I wouldn't say it's stagnated because it's still very modern and very fresh, but we haven't introduced many new features from like the latest and greatest Vue CLI templates. So they're upgrading this stuff all the time. And what we're trying to do is build our own plugin to add the integration for our backends. We load these Vue apps in a special way, so we have permissions and all that stuff taken care of. And so by adding a plugin for that, we don't need to cut a template and copy paste that. We can just build out the Vue CLI as expected in the docs, and then add our plugin on top to buy that functionality without anything on top. I don't know if it's going to work or not, I'll be honest. We're just trying it. So if you've tried it and it hasn't worked, let me know before I get too deep into it. But that's where we're going. And I think that's a pretty interesting problem to solve because you can keep the modern features and still make it easy. I know GraphQL has plugins and stuff like that, so there's plenty of things you can try to integrate with Vue if you're motivated enough. One more thing I want to try is, has anyone heard of Create React app by any chance? Yeah. Create React app. I know React is like a dirty word here.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, but it's basically a package that helps you generate an app quickly. It's kind of like what Vue CLI does. But what's really interesting to me is that if you look at the npm docs, you have a command called npm init, which is a way to just create a new project out of a template. And the pattern they follow is create dash whatever. And so if we have like a create Optoro Vue app or something like that, you can just run npm init and it'll build it for you without anything else. You don't need any special tools, no stuff like that. It'll just work out of the box. And your users will be like, whoa, that's super cool. Developers will be like, how did this magic happen? But it's not that much magic. It actually works from similarly to how Vue CLI and Create React app works. I forgot to mention, oh, that looks terrible on a black background. I forgot to mention one of the first packages that we published. Oh, well, there we go. If you haven't found this extension, it's called Dark Reader. It's awesome. It makes your background black. And also Chrome's new black theme is so good. Anyway, we shipped a customized bootstrap to NPM. That's one of our first big, I don't know about big wins, but first use cases for why we added NPM. We were previously sharing a bootstrap install across all of our applications. And that was kind of tricky because what if one person wanted to change how the dropdown looked? It would affect all the other applications, or you'd have to build it from scratch or figure out a way to isolate your changes. This way, using Bootstrap, we have basically added a default default palette and default customization to Bootstrap. And so every developer can just tap into that right away without worrying about affecting other apps around them, like I mentioned, because they can upgrade whatever they want using the NPM pattern. And what's next is we're exploring these. I think if anyone was at the last Vue meetup, it was actually out of Optoro, they would have seen Vuetify in that cannabis growing app, which was super weird for a lot of reasons. But we are a Bootstrap shop on the desktop, and we use material design on the mobile device because we want our users to feel familiar with the Android. And so all the devices we run Android, and so that's kind of why we might choose that. We've only used Material Design Lite so far, just taking baby steps at a time, like I mentioned about the iterative development. But we might go to a full-fledged package solution sooner or later. We will see. There's different opinions around this, and it's just interesting to follow the conversation, I think. All right, and then the last one I've got is native script. And I haven't tried this, and I don't really have very strong opinions around this, but this is kind of what a Vue offering that's more similar to React Native would look like. And there's a lot of competing, I guess, risks to balance here, I think, is because the interesting part is we control all the hardware that we use. So if a client wants to use our hardware, we ship it to them, and they use what we offer. They can't bring someone to the table and say, hey, we want to use this iPad from 2014. We're like, absolutely not. You have to use what we decide to use. And it might be kind of tricky because we've got to make sure that whatever we choose for a native integration would actually be supported by these devices. And we would also have to maintain that support. So if our vendor decided to upgrade something out of like from underneath us, we'd have to make sure native script would actually support that. But what's really cool about this, I think, is what everyone might be thinking about with React Native is you can use the same components across desktop, mobile, and native applications. So there's definitely some upside there. There's probably a lot of downside there, and I've talked to our native developer about it. He thinks that it's 90% of the way there is easy to get. The last 10% is the most challenging to actually get like the native animations, the features that you kind of expect from a native. So I guess this is definitely not on our radar, but I've just looked into it and thought it was interesting and it might be compelling. So I'd be curious if anyone's tried it and want to hear experiences. And I think it's actually a pretty new offering, maybe only a year or two old. Can't know. Definitely would be interesting, I think, if it works. All right, and finally, I honestly don't know what's up next for Optoro with Vue. I've just described some stuff that I have in my head about it and some stuff that we're trying so far. So if you want to get involved, please let me know, and happy to talk to you about it. Whether you want to work with us or you recognize something that we're trying, that you've tried or have succeeded or failed at, let me know. We'd love to have a conversation about it just so we can share ideas and make sure we're all tracking along the same path together. So thanks for listening, and I hope I didn't ramble too much. But yeah, happy to answer any questions you have. Yeah. Track the language. Oh, it's called code owners. Code owners. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. It is the file level, yeah. But you can do globbing in it, I think. So it's not like you have to do every single file you want. That's too massive. Yeah, it's you basically add one of these files to your GitHub repo, and it will ping those people that you've identified whenever they make a pull request. Whenever anyone makes a pull request, that changes those files. So it's kind of an easy way to automate getting your parts. Yeah.
In React with prompts, how do you build it?
That's a good question. So, like I mentioned, the Unix philosophy was a little bit helpful for me there. To when I noticed, like, if you're asking for input doesn't care about the rules that you're applying on it, but it cares about accepting characters or digits or whatever from a user. And so, finding the boundaries between that's not easy. But I guess if the way I try to think about it is, if I want to move this to a different page, what part about it do I want to move? Do I want to move what it looks like? Do I need to move the logic? And so if I want it to look the same but act differently, I will kind of make what's called a dumb component, or just a presentational component. That'll just have styles in it, basically, and maybe some small methods, but not a whole lot of stuff. And it'll emit events. It won't accept external state except from props. So like I probably won't hook it into Vuex, for example. And it'll always emit events when things happen. So it's not going to actually like write to my API. It'll just say, hey, whoever's up there that needs to know about this stuff, here's the info. And if I need to move that like business logic across pages, I'll make a mix it. And that way I can like easily add mix into different components where it needs to. And that's more of like a smart component that has more, that might actually hook into my API, and that might be what changes the Vuex store. Is that helpful at all? I love the single file components. Have you tried those before?
Yeah, I mean only React.
Got it. Okay. I haven't written a React app since like 2016, I think. Not that I wouldn't do it again. React's pretty cool and introduced a lot of these ideas. But the CSS and JS stuff is something that I can't get my head around. And I think the way Vue does that with single file components, where they have the JavaScript and styles, in the same file but separate tags is pretty cool. It's a pretty good common ground. But yeah, like when you, I mean, there's also like the lines of code barometer where like you're getting over 100 lines of code or something like that. It's arbitrary, but you can kind of tell when, hey, maybe I'm mixing my concerns here and breaking. How do you do it in React?
Basically, just trying to keep presentation.
Yeah.
How did you break?
Yeah, totally. I like that. And something you said triggered something else in my head that, like, I think about my state transitions as well. It's like, what's actually driving the state of my application? Is it the input or is it the output of that input? Hard to say fast. It's helpful for me when I design APIs. It's like it's not the data structure that's interesting. It's like how the data change or what events affect it. Who calls what to change. Yeah, that's it. Only like all the internal states encapsulated. You're not. It's all passed through props or emitted. Props down, events up, right? Any more questions? Cool. Did I convince you to use Vue? Awesome. All right. Thanks again, everyone.